marriage that makes the marriage great. Before we begin, if you have a phone on the side, it's got a little button. Please find it and put it on mute, on vibrate. Please don't let it go off in the congregation. So, very well. So, Sermon on the Mount, right, in Matthew chapter 5 through 7, that is really how to have a blessed life. And really, the point I'm trying to make as I am talking about the Sermon on the Mount and having a blessed life, you can't have a blessed life without a good marriage. If you don't have a good marriage, it's very hard to have a life that you can enjoy. So the good news is that Jesus, in the Sermon on the Mount, if we learn those principles, those attitudes, we can have and apply them to marriage. Marriage could be transformed into something very positive and a very good marriage. So, speaking about the sermon about the Beatitudes, true blessedness and success is only achieved by the godly. So it is very hard for somebody to say, I think it's impossible for somebody to say, oh, I'm very blessed, very successful, but I don't believe in God. There is a form of success that is achieved in the world, but without really having God in your life present, that's not really true success. You can say, well, you're a gospel preacher, what are you going to say? But just that's my opinion, okay? Speaking of the marriage, if a husband and wife apply the Lord's teaching to their own lives, they will experience true success, including a successful life together. And speaking of the Beatitudes, which is really our attitudes, it's about behavior. Our character and behavior will determine whether we will enjoy the fruit of true blessedness or the bitterness of ultimate failure in marriage. So it is very important for us to develop the character that Jesus talks about in the Sermon on the Mount. And it's very important to have that character in our interaction with everybody, but especially to apply that to our marriage relationship. So to have a blessed marriage, we have to follow Christ by developing the godly attitudes of character that we read on the Sermon on the Mount. Okay, I'm going to say it again. So you want to have a blessed marriage, both husband and wife, they have to be focused on developing the godly attitudes and character of the gospel, of the eternity, of the citizens of heaven, right? That's the attitude of a Christian, of the man or woman of God. Oftentimes, when a marriage starts to go in the wrong direction, it's because of attitudes. It's because of character. It's because of how people treat the other or act around the other. So we're going to talk a lot about attitudes this morning, and really Beatitudes. That's really what the Sermon on the Mount is about, right? About the Beatitudes, and Beatitudes have to do with certain attitudes that you have to be or to have. So to have a blessed marriage, also you have to follow Christ by being Christ-like in how we treat others, especially how you treat your spouse, right? We're talking about marriage. If we treat our spouses the way, in a very Christ-like manner, we will have a great marriage. There's no higher standard of treating someone than if you can figure out how to treat them in a Christ-like way. Yes, sir?
One of the saddest things that I've noticed over the years is we'll treat our family worse than we'll treat people that aren't our family.
Yeah.
And it's just really sad because your family is the closest thing to you,
Yeah.
second apart from God.
And your wife even more. Your wife is you.
Yeah.
You're one.
But I mean, it's just, you see that all the time, you know, a guy might treat his buddies, all the people he comes in contact with, just great.
Yeah.
But he can't treat his wife or his kids or anything,
Yeah.
you know, very well. It's an unfortunate, that's
Yeah.
the attitude
Yeah.
we're talking about, having the wrong attitude towards the
Right.
whole.
Right. Yeah, which is terrible. They're going to treat some people good, why don't you treat good those people in your own household? But it's true. I don't know what it is. It's true. As if people let their guard down and they're okay to just be themselves, as opposed to when you come in someone's presence that you don't know, you're going to put your best manners, but you don't when you're talking to the people you love the most. It's really unfortunate.
You give it long enough, the true colors eventually come out.
True, even if they go to work, right? Yes.
Depending on how long you know the person.
Yeah.
Eventually you can see that.
It's true. It's true. So, you want to have a blessed marriage? Have the right attitudes, have the right Christ-like mindset. And if you want to have a blessed marriage, you have to follow Christ by seeking to please and honor God, not ourselves. Oftentimes, whenever a marriage goes south, it's because one person or both involved in that marriage, it makes it about them. We talk about the selfishness, right? About ego, and we talked about this before. How ego is the number one killer of relationships, especially of marriages. When you make it about yourself, so we should not make it about ourselves. We should make it about pleasing God. If you are going to be deciding that you're going to please God in marriage, you will have a successful marriage because God tells you how to be a great wife, how to be a great husband, and when a husband or wife treat each other right is because they're honoring God, right? It's not about the other person. Sometimes the other person may not even deserve it, we may think, but if we honor God, it doesn't matter. The same thing with the love of God that He has for us. God loves us no matter what, right? No matter if we're good or bad, or the same thing, we should love our spouse, right?
You mentioned when we see someone we don't think they deserve it.
Yeah.
With the attitude of Christ, He saw us when we didn't deserve it. Yet He died for the ungodly.
Of course.
And that is, I think, one of the hardest things
Yeah.
to get past sometimes. I have clients that I just, and yet you got to treat them as well as possible and do your very best, even if they're mean, even if they're not the nicest in the world, because who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows what influence you might have?
Yeah. It's true.
We can't let someone else's attitudes or behaviors become ours. Because if we do, then just like you said, we're not the light of the world or the salt of the earth. And then their sins become our sins because now we're acting in a behavior that's not Christ-like.
Yeah.
It becomes ourselves, we're not controlling the flesh. Those desires for us to maybe not be nice or be caring and understanding because, we just don't want their sins and their behaviors to become ours.
Yeah.
We're here to please God.
Yeah. And that's a good point because it's true. Sometimes in our life we may have relationships, whether it's with a customer or with a friend, that we don't enjoy. And the beauty of that is you can always terminate that relationship. Lisa's been asking me for a long time, honey, we have to fire this customer. We have to fire the customer. And last Friday I said, okay, we're going to fire this customer. She was so happy. And we did. But she's teaching the kids class. It's okay. But
That's why the kids were screaming.
yes, no. It wasn't the kids, no. So if it is, whether it's a friend or whether it is a stranger or whether it's a customer, you can easily terminate a relationship. But with a marriage relationship, you can't do that. Can you imagine? Because God said, you work it out. You cannot just walk away. You can walk away from many relationships, but if you're married, it's over. You for life. You better work it out. Brad?
I was just gonna say, you're right. My dad's right. It's like I have these students, and some are great, and some are a nightmare.
You can fire your students?
I can't fire my students, but I only have them for 1 year. So it's like
You're on a contract.
I have to put up with
Contract
it
expires.
Yeah, I have to
Yes.
put up with it for 1 year, but it helps me to grow in my patience and
Right.
my ability to teach and problem management and all these things. But then after that year, it's like, okay, I hope I've been a good influence.
Let it go.
on you, goodbye, and then it restarts all over again. So for me, it's kind of like a marriage because it's never going to end until I retire.
Right.
It's just practice. but those kids will move on where
Yeah.
I get
Yeah.
one wife.
Forever, yes.
Unless you become Mr. Feeney.
Yes, right?
But even with Bradley's example, when you learn to not be hateful for me, you can overcome it.
Right.
Yeah.
You can overcome it. Now me, I got a bunch of employees, some are children,
Right,
some are
right, right.
adults. And Aaron and I will talk about it, and I just have to laugh sometimes, like, how did they even survive this long? You know, I mean, what can I do to help make their lives better as opposed to, you know,
Yeah.
the opposite? And I think it's, you know, like with Bradley and the kids, just don't go into next year thinking it's just gonna be like last year. Think positive, think
Yeah.
forward, and try to move them along. And in all these relationships, putting
Yeah.
God first.
Yeah.
God, how would you want me to handle this? How would you like me to approach this? And sometimes we may not like the answer, but like when Jesus was confronted with the baptism of John, was it heaven or men? They wouldn't answer him.
Yeah.
He didn't answer them.
Yeah.
It's okay. You don't have to. You know, you don't have to need to get into a conflict unless of course it's going to pursue into something good. Just have a
Yeah.
conflict, just have a conflict. It's kind of ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. So, again, when we are thinking about having a blessed marriage, if we read the Sermon on the Mount, and we're going to go in and read some of the passages, starting in the beginning of chapter 5, verses 1 to 12, talks about the character and the attitudes of the two in the marriage. Then from 13 to 48, talk about how we should treat each other and have a Christ-like mindset. Then we move to chapter 6. Jesus continues the Sermon on the Mount. The first 34 verses talks about how we should seek to please God. If you please God, all things will fall in its place. And then finally, following Christ by focusing on conforming ourselves to God's will. So that will continue until chapter 7, the first 27 verses. So you see a little different aspects, different little tasks that we have for husbands and wives. But if we apply these, if we embrace these attitudes, these pieces of golden nuggets that Jesus gives us, if we apply them to our marriage, we will have a blessed marriage. So, developing godly attitudes and character, let's please, it starts with humility, right? And we see this in chapter 3. Let's please read, if you can go with me to Matthew chapter 5, and let's please read Matthew chapter 5, Jesus here, seeing the multitude, in verse 1, he went on a mountain, and when he was seated, his disciples came to him, and then he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, let's have a volunteer for verse 3. This is the first attitude that Jesus talks about. And I'm not sure if they're in order of importance, but I can't think of anyone that's more important than humility in the marriage relationship. Go ahead, sir.
Blessed are the poor in spirit, for there is the kingdom of heaven.
So blessed are the poor in spirit. Not going to go too deep into what that means. To be poor in spirit, it has to do with humility. If you have humility, what is humility? Okay, we all should know what humility is. Elena's like, we're so humble, we don't want to raise our hands to really. Who wants to tell me what humility is? Yes, Brad?
Putting yourself
Lower. Yes. It's the opposite of what? Of pride. Yes, the opposite of me and ego. So if we can really understand humility and make it a part of our marriage, how's that? Would a marriage work great if both people are very humble? Right, of course. So this is super, super applicable to the marriage relationship, to have that spirit of humility when you step into the marriage. The next one is number 4. Let's please somebody read verse 4. The first one is blessed are the poor in spirit, or blessed are the humble. Who wants to read verse 4? That's just one attitude, by the way. There's many others. Brad?
Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted.
So blessed are those who mourn. Again, we can go in so many different ways here, but what I'm extracting is that when you're sorry for the things you do wrong, oftentimes, and it goes hand in hand with humility, if you do something wrong in marriage, it's so important, whether it's the husband or the wife, they do something wrong, they said something wrong, to say, honey, I'm really sorry. That is such a powerful word in marriage. To say, I am sorry. It's like, and for some reason, it's just so hard because it depends on having the first attitude right. That means you humble about it, right? Because if you're not humble, it's very hard to say, I'm sorry. Because you always think someone else's fault because you're not big enough, man enough, woman enough to say, I'm sorry. And many relationships suffer because people do wrong stuff. As people always do wrong stuff, right? I mean, nobody's perfect, but then you don't want to say you're sorry, right?
It's a sad thing with our society nowadays. So many of our children are learning this blame game.
Somebody else's fault.
It's because. Just say you're sorry.
Yeah.
Just say you're sorry. Blame and all the, well, I would have done that if they would have done this or that, or it's like, just say you're sorry.
I don't know why it's so hard. I'll tell you, I've been married for 24 years. It's hard. It's for some reason, it's ego that goes in the way. I'm sure. And both me and my wife, we both have egos. Who doesn't, right? See, I'm trying to point somebody. Everybody's got doing it, right? It's true. I mean, raise your hand if you don't have a problem with your ego. Everybody has a problem with their ego. I mean, you're not included because you, yes. So it's just so hard to say, I'm sorry. Yes, Tracy's like, forget it. I'm going to fix this. I'm not going to get married. Yes, Brad.
The problem with retaliation as well, and I see it in my students, and I know it happens in all relationships, but one student does something else, and the other student retaliates. It's like, if you had stopped and told me, then they would have been in trouble, and you wouldn't have. But now you're both in trouble, and in the relationship, well, my wife did this, so I'm going to get back at her by doing something else. So you're just causing spite and hatred and animosity rather than, let that go. Don't retaliate. Talk about it. You can't just let it go and let it
Right.
fester. Yeah, couldn't think of a word. But you can't let it fester. You have to be able to talk about it, and then whoever's at wrong has to have that mournful spirit, and apologize, and then move on.
Yeah, if you have the right Christ-like mindset, like we talked earlier, Erin?
What Riley's talking about, these are all signs of immaturity, right? Like retaliation, not willing to accept responsibility.
Right.
That's character of an immature attitude. So to be here, you have to have a
Very different mindset, yeah.
immaturity.
Absolutely. And really, that's really why sometimes marriages don't work, because one or two members of that couple, they are immature, and immaturity is very dangerous, because when you're immature, you only see yourself, right, as opposed to see the needs for others. Yes, sir.
Piggybacking off of Eric, and we talk about the past lessons. That's why we have to choose wisely.
Right.
The wife and the women on her husband.
Right.
That plays a good role.
Right.
Maturity, so
Right.
mature. It works. The concept of
Yeah. We already passed the lesson that you married the right person, so you already have the right person right now. Now you how you're going to behave once you're in the marriage. Shante?
Yeah, sometimes it's like, I read somewhere that it takes two, like when you have an argument, and I remember we had a little tip the other week about something, and it was like, I'm sorry, I reflected on what happened,
Yeah.
like, and I'm sorry for acting out, and then it took the other person to say, I'm sorry, I realized I could have said something
Sure.
as well,
Yeah.
and then realizing and humility that both play a part in that
Yeah.
conversation or whatever, and then
Yeah.
acknowledging that together, and I think
Yeah.
both ways.
It can't just be one.
Absolutely, because it gets very tiresome if it's just one person. I mean, you can be the bigger person, and you can say, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. But 15 years later, it becomes very challenging.
It's hurtful whenever you're the only one
Of course.
that's contributed.
Yeah.
And the words go back and forth.
Yeah.
It's painful.
Yeah, yes, sir.
One of the things, what Aaron is saying about maturity, is so important because a husband and wife don't mature at the same time or at the same level. One will grow
Right,
and be at a place where the other needs to catch up.
right.
And helping one another in that is so important.
Right.
Okay? It's not an age thing. It's really about just an attitude thing, who you are.
Yeah, yeah,
I literally, I'll write up something,
yeah,
send it to her to fix it. So I can send it and not look stupid. Because I don't know how to write things. I really don't.
right.
It's-
You need ChatGPT. You can Stephanie will bring him on board, right? Yes.
Things have a problem with this. The lowest, that's where maturity comes in. And you start figuring out things that, and I've hired a couple of you guys to shop, and I'm so thankful, because they know more than I do.
Well, I don't know about that. Yeah,
Someone has better expertise in something, you know, the Lord blesses you.
right.
Put these people in your path and in your life. But in a marriage, I really think though that when one gets to this level, and I've seen it like in my family, my sisters, it's like, when it gets there,
Yeah,
you gotta be patient.
yeah, yeah.
You know, you gotta wait sometimes help it, or sometimes recognize that they're not ever gonna be a PhD or that kind of person. Doesn't mean you can't get along and do well together. It's just a matter of having that right attitude,
Yeah, yeah,
looking
yeah.
together.
Absolutely. So, working our way through the attitudes here. First is humility. Second is that spirit of saying that you're sorry when you've done something wrong. And just like Aaron said, or somebody said, it may not be 100% your fault, but it always takes two. What do they say, right? It takes two to tango. Just because the other person is present right next to you, they are involved, right? When two kids are having an argument, they're both at fault most often, right? Because you can't argue by yourself, right? Very hard. But it is still his fault, yes. So humility, sorrow for wrong, second attitude. Third attitude is be submissive. Verse 5, it says, who wants to read verse 5? Aaron?
Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth.
Again, we can talk about what the meek means, is that spirit of being lower than, it works a little bit hand in hand with humility, but it carries the idea of being submissive. And I'm talking that spirit is very powerful attitude for men and women. You can say, well, yeah, but what about the husbands? The husband's supposed to be submissive to the wife. It's an attitude. So it really depends on the circumstance, right? The man is not the husband. Well, I mean, when I think about meekness, what comes to mind? When I was in Wisconsin, we don't have them here, but we had like Summerfest there, and there would be those big horses, the Budweiser horses. What are they called? Yes. When you're in the presence of one of those horses, it's like you feel your heart going, beating a little bit faster, and I love horses. But that horse, I mean, when you look at them, they're like intimidating. And, it's crazy because you have this little person or little girl holds the little horse, holds the big horse. And is like controlling that horse. And the horse is just kind of sitting there and just kind of going along. I mean, if that horse really wanted to, could just destroy the whole, because it has so much strength. Yes, you have it under control. So the man and the woman, just because you have strength, that's what meekness means. It's power under control. So you have to be under control. Even though you are the man and you are the leader, you still have to be very much under control. Just because you're stronger, it's right? If that horse starts to act crazy, well, in a marriage too, neither should act crazy, right? Both should be subdued and really measured in how they respond, especially the men, I would say, because the man is the one mostly the one with a little testosterone, a little stronger spirit already in him, right?
Yeah, just, being submissive, the only way I can really think of how a man can be in that meek, submissive role with their wife, because it's not my way about it.
Yeah.
You sit down and discuss something with your wife, and she looks at it and says, I don't think that's a good idea. And it's valid.
Yeah.
Because you want to do it. And I don't mean buy a car or truck.
Yeah.
I know so many guys, I don't care what you think, I'm going to buy this truck. No, you sit down, with a big purchase, you don't go off and do that. That's not right, And you talk about it, and you come to agreements, and that's literally submitting one to another in that role of making decisions. And I think it's very important that men, understand, hey, it's all together.
Yeah, that's what it's the passage that we read last week. Live with them with understanding, right? I mean, you go get that truck and then you don't talk to your wife for 2 weeks, and then, I mean, if you continue with that spirit, that's not the right Christ-like spirit, right? So, very good. Okay, let's keep on going because we're just getting started. Humility, sorrow for doing wrong, being submissive, which goes both ways. And the next one is seek righteousness. Verse 6. Who wants to read verse 6? Stephanie?
There are those who hungry and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied.
Yes. So blessed are those who are hungry or who hunger for and thirst for righteousness. Many people are hungry and you go eat food, but the idea here is that you hunger for righteousness. Seek righteousness, not seek to be right, seek righteousness, and that's, you don't assume your own righteousness, is God's righteousness. So you have to seek for that, and then take that and apply it into the marriage. Again, everything in this lesson applies to marriage. Seek God's righteousness, hunger and thirst. If both the husband and wife hunger and thirst to be right with God, that's really what it means. You want to be right with God. If you can be right with God, if you can seek, that's really your North Star. That's the direction you're going. If your spirit, if your attitude is, I want to be right with God in the way I treat my wife, in the way I treat my husband, in the way I treat my kids, then you're on the right path. Very good. Okay, next. Yes, sir.
Well, we have the passage, we have a song, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all these things will be given unto you. It's like, if you put God first, everything else should follow suit. The blessings from Him, blessed marriage, blessed kids. But if God's not first, if it's me first, then nightmare is going to be followed. So we have the scripture to back it up outside of the Beatitudes, and Christ is just talking about is like, hey, if you're hungry and you're thirsting for righteousness, you're seeking it and you're going to be fed.
Right. You're going to receive it. Right. That's a good point. Okay. Yes, sir. Oh, you read what? You read the next point? He's read the next point. So the next point is that we have to be merciful and forgiving. So you see earlier, verse 4, we saw about our need to say, I'm sorry. And then once a person says, I'm sorry, we have to be forgiving. So verse 7. Yes, go ahead, sir.
Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy.
Yeah, thank you. Blessed are the merciful. Merciful, what does it mean to be merciful? Some people see being merciful as being weak or there's nothing weak about being merciful. Really is the spirit of being forgiving. If somebody comes to me and says, I'm sorry, you have to easily forgive and move on. And oftentimes I'll tell you this spirit of being merciful and forgiving applies really, what if Bradley, your wife, does something and you think it's wrong, and then do you have to necessarily wait for her to come and say, I'm sorry, before you forgive? No. She says, I didn't do anything wrong. Let's say she's gotten a bad day, okay? I don't have to say I'm sorry. That was not my fault. Let's pretend she talks like that. Not that she would ever say that. But let's say she would, or anybody. So you still have to forgive. I mean, look at Jesus on the cross. Father, forgive them, for they know not what they're doing. Jesus forgave even before they say, I'm sorry. And not just him. Think about Stephen. Stephen, the same thing. While he was being stoned, Father, forgive them. Then what about you? When, right? So, Shante?
Yeah, and sometimes, like, well, most of the time when you're forgiving someone, it's mostly to release that from yourself.
Yeah.
Too.
Mhm.
Like, I've learned out of experience, forgiving someone who's hurt you, it, even if they don't know it, like, that, like, really helps your soul, because
Yeah.
you don't hold on to that hurt.
Yeah. It's like something, weight that is holding you back. And it could hold you back. Some people, if you don't forgive, it's going to hold you back for the rest of your life. So no matter what somebody has done to you, even if somebody has done to you something that's very legitimate and they didn't say I'm sorry, or they really did so much damage, in order to move on, you have to forgive. You have to forgive, hard as it is. Hard as it is. I'll never forget when I was in my second year of medical school. I think I told you this before. I had a big mouth, of course, and I heard something from some kid that my professor of genetics, she took a bribe from a foreign student to pass the exam. And I was so dumb, and I said it to somebody. I was not smart. And then that person, somebody, was friends with the professor and went told the professor. Did I tell you the story? And guess what the professor did? And this was Romania. People don't care. It's not like nowadays with the...
He asked for part of the bribe.
Oh, more than that. Back in my days, you can't just continue with the year if you fail a class. And she says, you know, because you did that, I will have you repeat the whole year. And I repeated second year of medical school. And then the next year, I studied so hard. And I went to the exam in front of a whole bunch of kids. And I did so well in the exam. I was like a perfect student. And she said to me, if it wasn't for your relatives and for your friends and for your connections, I would have let you do this again. Yes. That was Romania in the 90s. So, yeah, teachers had that much power. Don't you wish you had that kind of power with your students, right, Brad? Not anymore so much, right? I mean, you used to have more power in this country too. But anyway, so all because I opened up my mouth, and you know, and I'm telling you, I struggle with the heart, to forgive her. It's like, you gotta be kidding me. Okay, I did something wrong, but really, you're gonna slow? And I'll never forget, because I opened up my mouth and I shouldn't have, and I learned how to forgive. It took me a long time. I was not able to forgive her in that year, and it took me a few years to say, I let it go. I let it go. But then when you let it go, it just feels so much better and you can just move on. Of course, he gave me, I mean, the Lord was in that, because I ended up knowing new people and I was able to form new relationships, but I never forgot just because I opened my mouth. So if you have any questions about genetics, I'm really good at genetics. Twice. Yes, sir.
I just want to say that's a great story, and thanks for clarifying that, because it shows even though forgiveness, it feels so difficult in the moment because there's emotions that come in, so many factors that come into that. But the reward of the peace that we get from it for forgiving the person and showing mercy is just far beyond that holding that in. Because holding that in just creates, if you don't forgive, I mean, I can't remember exactly what the scripture said, but it leads to anger and bitterness, and it ruins your soul.
It does. It does. And sometimes, you know, you end up with lessons that it forces you to learn, right?
Transformation comes through suffering.
Yes, exactly.
The scriptures tell us.
Exactly.
We have to know we're going to suffer, because that's how God transforms our heart and mind to please Him. So it's God's will.
Yes, definitely that was suffering, because medical school in Romania is supposed to take 6 years. It took me 7 because of that stupid thing I said. It was true. It was true, but it doesn't matter if it's true. It can be true. Still, you shouldn't say even things that are true. Right?
You know, I find that forgiving is a lot easier when I put into context my own sin and the fact that if I don't forgive, neither will God forgive me. And I want to be forgiven.
Right. Well, of course, absolutely.
You know? And I think it goes back to developing
Yeah.
You know, when we're younger, we just don't think like that.
Right.
We don't even consider the fact that, you know, wait a minute, my salvation,
Yeah. Yeah.
my forgiveness is dependent
Yeah.
upon me
Yeah.
being forgiven.
Yeah.
You know, and it just, and Jesus is going to get to that here in this study, but it's just a lot easier.
Yeah.
Just a lot easier when
Yeah.
you think, okay, this is me having God forgive me too.
Yeah. Absolutely. Very good. We have a few more times. Let's see how many more attitudes we can learn. So be merciful and forgiving. Super, super important. If you're married now, I hope that you have a forgiving spirit. But if you're going to get married and you're going to have a spouse, you have to learn to have this attitude of being forgiving. Don't hold a grudge. You'll kill your marriage. Next one. Verse 8. Who wants to read verse 8? Shante.
Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God.
See God. Blessed are the pure in heart. So pure in heart, we understand here, pure in heart, to have a pure heart, to be sincere, right? You can go in so many directions with this. Pure in heart, sincere, holy. You can toss things here in this bucket like you can't lie to your spouse, right? Can you do that? Shouldn't. Lying to your spouse is very, very pernicious, very, very bad, because it just breaks relationships. Nothing breaks relationship as when you can trust that person, right? So it's very important for us as we have a relationship with our spouse to have a pure heart about our intentions, our motives, our decisions, sometimes not hiding things from each other, not lying to each other, being honest, being holy. Verse 8, yes, Rhett?
One of the things, when I read this verse, it always makes me stop and think about, how do you see God? Do you see him as a vengeful, hateful, mean, you're sinned, I'm going to throw you to hell type person? Or do you see him as a loving, kind, merciful, I sent my only begotten son so that you would not end up apart from me? And, you know, when you're pure in heart, I mean, it really does help you to see God in a better way,
right?
A positive way. I listen to the voice talk quite often, and Zach is he's always saying something, like on the way to church today, something that can't be done. Why don't you think about how it might be done versus can't be done? I don't know, you know? But I mean, twist everything into a positive, forward-moving action that's going to get you positive results is always better than what you can't do.
Yeah.
You know, and what you can't do, you just don't read.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah. Yes. Brad?
In Mark chapter 7, verse 21 through 23, Jesus says, "For from within, out of the heart of man comes evil thoughts, sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, coveting, wickedness, deceit, sensuality, envy, slander, pride, foolishness. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a person." So we had this contrast here of this is a sinful heart, and this is a pure heart. So if all of this sin comes from the heart, and all this sin would destroy a marriage, let alone any relationship. But if you have a pure heart, then all of your actions are going to be pure, righteous, holy. And I think that's why it's like, that's what you're aiming for. That's what you want in your marriage relationship. That's what you want in all relationships, because that mirrors Christ, which means we'll be seeing God.
Right. I appreciate you saying that, and it's so true. Although I'll tell you, is that so much easier said than done. All of these attitudes are so important, yet it's because people fail that marriages fail and relationships fail. So yeah, people sometimes will not be sincere. People sometimes will not be holy, will not have pure thoughts, will not be forgiving. So let's see the next one. Number 9. This one is super, super important. 9. Who wants to read 9? Read.
Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God.
Peacemakers. Do you think that this attitude is important in marriage? To be a peacemaker?
I think it's important in every relationship, especially in marriage.
Especially in marriage. If you don't seek peace, can you imagine if, and how beautiful it would be for both husband and wife to really seek peace. Whatever happens, yes, we had a bad day. This was not an easy thing what happened today. And you have plenty of those in marriage. If both husband and wife are set their mind to have that peacemaker spirit. Imagine everything comes to peace, 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 right? As opposed to what's the opposite? Conflict, constantly argument. It's just terrible. Who loves conflict and argument? Some people do. Some people can't they can be themselves if there's some kind of conflict somewhere. It's terrible. We have to seek peace and to be peacemakers. Husband and wives look to make peace. Okay? Let's see if we can squeeze a couple more. The next one is endurance. Maybe one more. And then we'll continue next week. Endurance. Somebody please read verses 10 through 12. Who hasn't spoke so much today? Go ahead.
Blessed are they who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when they insult you and persecute you and utter every kind of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven. Thus they persecuted the prophets who were before you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So, do you think it takes endurance when you are in a marriage? Endurance, it does. I mean, some of you are married and you understand. And, or I've talked to you about persecuted for righteousness' sake, but this can happen in the marriage. But sometimes you can be persecuted, and can sometimes husbands and wives speak evil against you? Is there such a thing in marriage? Can you have a marriage that the husband or the wife speaks evil against the other? Some people do that, and it's crazy. It's crazy. Think about it. This is your spouse, and you're going to talk evil about her.
To the children.
To the children, to your mother, to anybody that would listen sometimes. And then, oh, my marriage is not so great. Well, no kidding. Right?
You know, the one thing marriage is not is a competition.
Mm-hmm.
I think that when husbands and wives are in a constant competition, it tends to kind of make them more callous to needs and desires and everything else, as opposed to always being helpful. When each partner helps,
Yeah.
and, no matter what it is,
Yeah.
and you develop that, and you're making things easier.
Yeah.
Endurance is so much better.
Yeah.
It's so much.
Yeah, so just know that in a marriage, if you want your marriage to last, it's like a marathon, and sometimes you'll get very hard, and you have to really endure. And endure is not fun, but sometimes in marriage, it takes a lot of endurance. We can talk about that a whole lot more, but I think it's good for us to stop because it's time for us to begin the class in 15 minutes. So let's take a break, and please be here on Wednesday. We'll continue this study. Okay, thank you.